Welcome to the Spiritual Awakening Path. I'm so glad you're here today. In this video, we're going to dive into a very powerful topic, the top 10 strongest signs of the final stage of awakening, and 2 of them are rarely ever talked about. When your spiritual journey reaches its final threshold, you'll notice that the old rules no longer apply. The beliefs, practices, or roles you once clung to start to fall apart. And this collapse, it isn't a loss. It's a sacred unraveling, a necessary dismantling that allows you to return to the purest essence of who you are. And here's the truth. Not everyone on the spiritual path will reach this stage. This is the ultimate level, the point where even the strongest healers, those who've spent their lives helping others, must face a complete breakdown before they can be reborn. Maybe right now you're feeling lost. Maybe you've lost motivation, or you don't want to be around too many people anymore. You might think you're in some kind of personal crisis. But in reality, it may be a sign that you're moving through the final awakening, the defining stage where old energy is stripped away so that a new level of consciousness can rise within you. So stay with me until the very end of this video, because what I'm about to share may reflect your own journey and remind you that you are not alone. What you're experiencing is not the end. It is the doorway into a sacred rebirth. Imagine this. One morning you wake up, and suddenly all the familiar impulses you've lived with for years are just gone. You no longer feel like calling someone to cheer them up. You don't feel like picking up another self-help book or joining a meditation circle. And even looking deeply into your own emotions, something that's guided you for so long, no longer feels necessary. Instead, there is only a strange, quiet stillness. For many people, this stage can feel terrifying. They start to wonder, have I lost my sensitivity? Am I no longer a healer? Have I become cold and numb? I've heard this question many times, especially from those who have spent their lives with wide open hearts, always giving to others. And I want to tell you this. No, you haven't lost your compassion. You are simply entering a deeper layer of awakening. Let me share a story from my own experience. A woman in her 60s once came to me. For years, she had been the rock for her family, her friends, even her community. She healed through her words of encouragement, through meditation circles, and through countless small acts of kindness. But one day she realized she no longer wanted to do any of it. Listening to others felt exhausting, and even the practice of healing herself had lost its meaning. She looked at me and said, "I'm afraid. I'm not myself anymore." And I smiled at her gently. "No, you haven't lost yourself. You are being emptied. This is what I call the sacred emptiness. A holy pause, a clearing out. It isn't a breakdown. It's more like a room being cleared so it can be filled with a new gift." Even science has a way of describing this. Our nervous system simply cannot stay in giving mode forever. After years of constant output, it begins to shut down those impulses, not to harm us, but to reset and restore balance. It's not weakness. It's the natural wisdom of the body. Think of it like this. Imagine a water pitcher. When it's full, you can't pour anything more into it. Only when it's emptied can fresh, pure water flow in again. Your soul works the same way. So if you find yourself no longer wanting to heal others, or even yourself, don't assume your heart has closed. See it instead as a sign, a sacred invitation, a purification process, preparing you for the return of your original energy, the raw, primal force you carried long before you ever took on the role of healer. I often remind those I walk with, when silence comes, don't be afraid. Sit with it. Trust that you are being prepared for some far greater than you can imagine. And maybe, if these words are reaching you now, it's because you too are stepping into this very stage. Let me ask you this. Have you ever had a moment when everything around you suddenly felt unbearably loud? Not because people were talking too much, but because you could no longer tolerate any kind of noise. The phone rings, and instead of feeling convenient, it feels like it's tearing apart your peace. A song that once moved you now feels overwhelming, almost suffocating. Even a heartfelt conversation with a friend starts to feel like static you can't engage with anymore. When this happens, many people worry. They ask, am I becoming distant from the world? Why do I only crave silence, solitude? But in truth, this is not a sign of disconnection. This is a calling from your own nervous system and from your soul. I often explain it this way. The human body is like a complex electrical system. Over the years, you've absorbed countless signals, sounds, information, emotions, requests, and all of that input is like currents running wildly through your wires, overheating the circuits. Eventually, the system demands a reset. It asks to shut down the power so it can restructure. What you feel in that moment is the deep craving for absolute silence. A man in his 50s once shared with me that he couldn't stand the sound of the TV anymore. The moment his wife turned on the news, his heart would start racing, his breath quickening. Instead of telling him he was just getting grumpy with age, I explained, "No, this is your nervous system asking for recalibration. It simply can't take in the noise anymore, because a deeper layer within you wants to be heard." And here's the beauty of it. In that silence, the miracle begins. When the outer noise fades, you finally start to hear the inner voice, the whisper of your soul. It doesn't come as a booming prophecy or dramatic message. More often, it's a gentle clarity like a soft breeze. This is what you truly need to do. This is the direction you're meant to walk in. I want you to imagine stepping into a forest at dawn. Everything is still. The world hasn't fully woken up yet. There's no sound except the faint rustle of leaves. In that stillness, the tiniest bird song rings out clear and sharp. Your soul works the same way. It's always whispering, but you can only hear it when the world outside grows quiet. So if the phone feels too loud, the music feels chaotic, or even simple conversations feel like a burden, give yourself permission to step away. Find that quiet corner. Don't feel guilty for needing it, because in that stillness, a new layer of energy, pure, deep, and primal, is awakening within you. And let me remind you, this silence is not an escape, it is a homecoming. Have you ever been sitting quietly, and out of nowhere, a wave of sadness rises up inside you? It doesn't seem to be tied to a memory. It's not about your personal life, yet the feeling is so real, heavy, deep, and sometimes it even brings you to tears. And then, in other moments, right in the middle of an ordinary day, you suddenly feel your heart overflowing with love, for no reason at all. Many people get confused when this happens. They wonder, do I have some kind of psychological issue? Why do I feel grief when nothing bad has happened? Why do I feel so moved by things that don't even concern me? What I want you to know is this. This is one of the most subtle and sacred signs of spiritual awakening. You are becoming a channel of purification. Imagine yourself as a clear, flowing river where streams of muddy water from all directions come to merge. Not so you can carry all that mud forever, but so that through you, it can be filtered, cleansed, and returned to clarity. In my years of working with hundreds of people, I've noticed a pattern. The deeper someone goes into awakening, the more sensitive they become to collective energy. We are not just individuals. We are threads in the vast web of human consciousness. And when waves of fear, anxiety, or even love move through that collective field, some awakened souls become the gateways through which these energies pass and transform. I remember a woman in her 60s telling me, "I don't understand. One day I was just gardening, and suddenly I broke down crying as if I had lost someone close to me. But in reality, everything in my family was fine. Then a few hours later, I felt light and clear, almost radiant." I explained to her, that sadness wasn't only yours. You were helping to release the pain that so many other souls don't know how to process. And here's the key. You don't need to carry the weight of the world. You're not asked to sacrifice yourself or save anyone. Your role is simply to allow these waves to pass through you, like an open doorway. When you stop resisting, when you breathe deeply and accept, the energy naturally transforms on its own. I invite you to think back to the last time you felt an emotion with no clear origin. Did you fight it, or did you let it pass through? Now imagine this. Instead of fear or confusion, you could view it like a cloud drifting across the sky. It comes, it goes, but the vast sky within you remains steady, expansive, and still. This is the gift of becoming a channel of purification. You learn to let go of the ego, to open your heart wider, and at the same time you contribute to the healing of the collective without having to bear the burden or suffer under its weight. Do you remember the last time you put on an old shirt that used to be your favorite, only to realize it suddenly felt tight, restrictive, almost suffocating? Not because your body has changed so much, but because your soul has outgrown it. Spiritual awakening feels exactly the same. The habits that once kept you safe now feel boring. The tools that used to support you no longer seem to work. And perhaps most painful of all, the relationships that once felt like the center of your life no longer fit. It's not that you don't love them. It's simply that your frequency has shifted. I once worked with a man in his mid-50s who told me, "I walked into my usual coffee shop, sat down with my old friends, listened to them talk about business, money, cars, and instead of feeling excited like I used to, I felt like I was watching a movie I had no interest in being part of anymore." I smiled and said, "That's the clearest sign your soul is ready for a new chapter. That old movie is no longer yours to play in." When this happens, you may feel as if you're floating between timelines. You don't want to go back to the old place, but you're not yet sure where you're headed. It's a suspended state, uncertain, unsettling, sometimes even frightening. But I want you to trust this. It's in this in-between space that rebirth happens. Think of a butterfly. Inside the cocoon, the caterpillar completely dissolves. If you could peek inside, you'd see chaos, the old form gone and the butterfly not yet born. A state of no longer this, but not yet that. And that's exactly where you are right now. The most important thing is not to rush into finding a new shirt to wear. Don't force yourself to define everything before it's ready. Instead, allow yourself to rest in the transition. Trust that, like the butterfly, you too will emerge with brand new wings. So let me ask you, can you believe that this uncertainty you're living through is actually the greatest gift? That not fitting into the old version of yourself isn't a loss, but living proof that you've expanded beyond your previous limits. If you are in this phase, be gentle with yourself. Take a deep breath and remind yourself, I'm not losing anyone. I'm not losing anything. I'm becoming a larger, freer, more authentic version of who I am. This is not an ending. This is a complete rebirth. Have you ever had a moment where, without any clear reason, you just knew you had to do something? Not the anxious, overthinking kind of knowing, but a quiet, steady certainty deep within. Like when you step outside and feel you should take a different road, only to find out later that the usual route was backed up for hours. In this stage, intuition is no longer vague or mysterious. It becomes direct action, clear, effortless, as natural as breathing. You no longer need to pull a tarot card, wait for a sign in the sky, or seek advice from someone outside yourself. Your body, your heartbeat, your breath, the sensation in your gut, a vibration in your chest, is the compass. I remember a 62-year-old woman once told me, "I just knew I had to call my son that day. No reason at all. And at the very moment I called, he needed me most." Her eyes shimmered as she said, "That was the moment I realized I don't need any other proof, that knowing itself is enough." Even science has begun to touch on this. Neuroscientists call them somatic markers, signals from the body that guide the brain to make quick decisions without endless logical analysis. But anyone who has stepped into awakening knows it's more than biology. It's the soul and body resonating together, working as an inner compass. You'll notice this shift even in small things. Meeting someone new, you don't need to hear their life story. Within minutes, your body already knows this person brings peace or something here doesn't fit, and you no longer argue with that knowing. You trust it. You act on it. This is when you step beyond the stage of learning, where you relied on books, lectures, tools, and into embodiment. You don't just read about intuition anymore. You become intuition. You don't just study divine guidance. You live it every single day. Think back to the last time you had such a knowing. Maybe you turned down a job, even though everyone told you to take it. Or maybe you chose to go somewhere, and that place opened a life-changing path for you. Did you regret it, or did you feel gratitude that you trusted yourself? If you're in this phase, remember, you don't owe anyone an explanation. You don't need evidence. The stillness in your heart is the proof. And when you live from that place, even the smallest decisions become leaps toward freedom. This is the stage where you stop seeking and begin embodying. Have you ever felt this? One day, the practices you've relied on for years, meditation, energy work, sacred rituals, suddenly feel empty. You go through the motions, but there's no flow anymore. The words you once used to comfort others echo back at you like hollow sounds. and instead of panic, there's a strange stillness, as if an invisible hand is gently dismantling the old to make way for something completely new. In this stage, your old style of healing begins to dissolve. It no longer fits the frequency you now carry. You are no longer the one doing the healing. You are the frequency of healing itself. You're not giving something to others anymore. Your very presence has become the medicine. I remember seeing this for the first time in a former student of mine. She had been a very successful energy healer with a long list of clients. And then, almost overnight, she couldn't hold sessions the way she used to. She felt drained. Her words no longer landed. She was terrified that she had lost her gift. But when she let go of trying, when she simply sat in silence with a client, something extraordinary happened. The other person began to cry, then breathe deeply, then speak aloud what needed to be released. No techniques, no formulas, just presence, and it was enough. This is the shift of the final awakening. When silence becomes more powerful than any lecture, when a single gaze can unlock years of buried pain, when simply breathing together can change the energy field of an entire room. Even modern science is beginning to recognize this. Researchers call it coherence, the frequency resonance between two bodies. When someone enters a deep state of balance, their heartbeat and brainwaves can actually entrain another person, like two instruments naturally tuning to each other. But those who are walking through this spiritual rebirth know it goes far beyond science. This is the soul working through us, and you may notice it in the simplest of moments. Sitting beside someone without a word, and suddenly they exhale deeply, as if a heavy weight has been lifted, a gentle touch that carries more comfort than 1,000 explanations. The way someone looks into your eyes and says, "I feel safe with you." That's when you understand, healing is no longer something you do, it's something you are. Have you noticed your body becoming unusually sensitive lately? Conversations that used to feel ordinary now leave you strangely drained. A simple family gathering or catching up with friends, once warm and familiar, suddenly feels heavy, almost suffocating. Your body reacts in ways you can't ignore. Headaches, tension, stomach issues, even waves of anxiety that seem to come out of nowhere. But this doesn't mean you're becoming weaker or too sensitive. In fact, it's one of the clearest signs that your energy is shifting. You're in a stage where your body, not just your mind, is starting to create new boundaries. It no longer allows you to stay in spaces or relationships that force you to shrink, to pretend, or to carry energy that isn't yours. I often remind my older students, your body is far wiser than you realize. It knows when you're pushing yourself to remain in a frequency that isn't aligned. The headaches, the digestive issues, the tightness in your chest, these aren't random, weird symptoms. They're your body's sacred language telling you, enough, this place is no longer safe for our soul. Think back to the last time you walked away from a gathering feeling like your energy had been completely drained. That experience was real. And during this stage of awakening, it becomes even more pronounced. But here's the truth. This isn't a sign of fear or isolation. It's the rewriting of your personal laws of connection. You no longer connect out of obligation, habit, or the need to be accepted. Now, connection only has meaning if it nourishes the truth within you. Picture yourself as a musical instrument being retuned. If a discordant note plays too long, the strings ache, maybe even snap. But when placed in the right resonance, everything flows, soft, natural, harmonious. That's exactly how your energy is operating now. So if you feel the urge to spend more time alone, don't label yourself as cold or difficult. Solitude in this season isn't isolation, it's alignment. You're not hiding from the world, you're learning to live in a new rhythm. And in this rhythm, every connection becomes rarer, clearer, and more meaningful than ever before. There comes a very special moment on the spiritual awakening journey, when you realize you are no longer here to be the healer, to carry the image of the Savior. You no longer feel the need to heal the whole world or shoulder the pain of others. Instead, you discover that what your soul most deeply longs to experience is simply being human. You begin to allow yourself a simpler life, eating a good meal without worrying about the energy of the food, laughing out loud without analyzing whether that laughter is a form of release, crying over an old memory and letting the tears fall naturally without labeling it as a spiritual lesson. Just existing, breathing, walking, like an ordinary human being. And within that very ordinariness, you find something profoundly sacred. I once met a man in his 70s who told me, "I spent my whole life trying to help people, but now all I want is to sit on my porch, drink tea, and watch my grandchild play. And strangely, the less I teach, the less I instruct, the more my grandchild comes to me, just to sit beside me. I don't say a word, but he tells me, 'I feel peaceful when I'm with you.'" That is the essence of transformation. You no longer need to do anything to heal, because your very presence becomes the medicine. In this stage, you become a mirror, not a guide. Others look at you, at the way you live honestly, the way you laugh, stumble, and rise again, and through that, they remember their own wholeness. There is no imposition, no ego of the one who knows better, only gentle, authentic companionship. And you begin to understand a deeper truth. Real strength isn't measured by how many people you can lift, but by how deeply you dare to live in your own truth. Power doesn't lie in the glow of being the healer, but in the breath, the gaze, the touch, and the heartbeat of an ordinary human being. This is the homecoming, a return to the body, to softness, to simple joys, to everything the soul has longed for from the very beginning. And when you live fully as a human, you unintentionally give the world its greatest medicine, the gift of your authentic presence. There comes a point on the awakening journey when you suddenly realize you are not just the person of this lifetime. In dreams, in flashes of intuition, or in an unexpected moment while looking at a familiar landscape, you feel as though you are remembering. Not childhood memories, not anything from your recent past, but fragments of the soul, wounds, strengths, scents, or rays of light belonging to lifetimes long ago. Sometimes you find yourself walking through a foreign city that feels strangely familiar. Sometimes you dream of symbols, rituals, or faces you've never studied. And sometimes all it takes is touching an object, and a wave of memory floods back, as if your hand had held it hundreds of years before. But here's the key. These memories don't come so you can relive them or cling to them. They come to remind you that you've carried power before, that you've lived with wisdom, that you already know how to walk this path. These fragments are whispers from your soul. You're not starting from zero. You are only remembering yourself. This is the moment when soul memory and present experience begin to merge. The past no longer feels separate from the now. It flows as one. You don't need to recreate an old version of yourself. Instead, you let that ancient wisdom dissolve into your breath, your choices, your gestures in this lifetime. A woman once shared with me that during meditation she saw glowing hands appear. At first she thought it was just her imagination, but later, when she placed her hands on the shoulder of a friend in pain, energy moved through her like water. She hadn't learned that kind of healing. Her body and soul had remembered it all along. And so it is for you. These ancient memories return not to pull you out of reality, but to lift this reality to a higher level. This is the union, where you live both as the human of today and the soul who has journeyed through thousands of lifetimes. There's a moment on the awakening journey when you realize your body isn't just a vessel for the soul, it is your spiritual compass. You start to feel it more vividly than ever. The subtle trembling in your hands when a big decision is near, the shiver running down your spine when you hear a profound truth, or the sudden heat rising in your chest when you step into a room filled with the wrong energy. And here's the thing. This isn't a medical symptom. It's your spiritual sensory system activating. Your body has been fine-tuned into a navigation device, acutely attuned to truth and falsehood, to resonance and dissonance. I remember during one of my talks, a middle-aged man stood up and said, "I don't need tarot anymore. I don't need signs from the universe. I just listen to my body. When my gut tightens, I know it's not the path for me. When my heart expands, I know that's the road I'm meant to take." And he was right. As we mature on the spiritual path, intuition stops being an abstract idea and becomes a tangible physical experience. The body is where the soul delivers its answers. This frees you from dependency on outside signs. You don't need cards, numbers, or anyone else's validation. Everything you need is already within, encoded in your heartbeat, your breath, and the subtle reactions of your body. When you begin to trust this embodied wisdom, every step feels clearer. No more confusion at the crossroads, no more waiting for someone else to lead. Your body, this spiritual compass, is the safest, truest guide you could ever follow. Think about it. How many times have you ignored those tiny signals, only to later realize your body was right all along? And how many times, just by pausing, breathing, and listening inward, did you find an answer more powerful than any outside advice? This is the ripening of the journey, when you no longer just learn, no longer just remember, but truly embody living wisdom, becoming a soul that guides itself through the very intelligence of the body. If you've made it this far and something inside you resonates, if a few of the signs I shared feel like they're shining a light directly on your own journey, please know, that is not a coincidence. You're crossing a sacred threshold, a path very few souls have ever walked. Take a moment to share in the comments, which sign speaks to you most clearly right now. I would love to hear your story, because it's in the sharing that we realize we are never truly alone. And if you want to keep walking this awakening path together, be sure to hit subscribe and turn on notifications. Here you'll always have a community, a safe space where you are seen, understood, and supported. You do not have to walk this path alone. As you close this video, I invite you to simply close your eyes, take a deep breath, and remember, even in silence, you are being carried by the flow of the universe. We will meet again on the very journey your soul has chosen.